In 1968, Bruce Lee, weighing just 59 kilograms, 130 pounds, completely destroyed a 45 kilograms, 100 pounds, sandbag with a single kick. He didn't tear it, he didn't rip the fabric. The bag literally exploded and flew into shreds. Physicists who studied this strike concluded that it required a force equivalent to being hit by a car traveling at 50 kilometers per hour, 31 miles per hour. How could a man who weighed half as much as most of his opponents break all laws of physics and biology time and time again? To understand this, one must go back to those documented feats that still make scientists and martial artists doubt whether Bruce Lee was an ordinary human being. Bruce Lee never called himself a Superman. He simply refused to believe that the word impossible was a final verdict. In the late 60s and early 70s, martial arts still lived by strict, almost sacred rules. Every style was a fortress. Masters kept secrets like treasures, passing them on only to the chosen few. Tradition stood above efficiency, but Bruce looked at all of it and saw only limitations that could and should be broken. He weighed only 59 kilograms, but every kilogram of his body was honed to a point where ordinary human biology began to burst at the seams. He didn't seek glory in the ring and didn't strive to become a champion under a set of rules. Something else mattered to him, proving that the human body is capable of far more than commonly believed. He took every technique apart down to the atom, studying the physics of movement, biomechanics, and neuromuscular connections, building something completely new out of it. For him, Jeet Kune Do was not a style, but a constant experiment. He trained as if he were trying to rewrite physiology textbooks every single day. And when those around him said it couldn't be done, Bruce simply did it again and even faster. There was always resistance around him. Traditional masters looked at him with suspicion. He taught foreigners mixed styles and experimented openly. Scientists and doctors who later studied his body only threw up their hands in astonishment. The density of his muscle fibers, the speed of his nerve impulses, and his ability to recover from extreme exertion were all far beyond normal limits. But Bruce himself didn't consider this a gift from above. To him, it was the result of obsession. He wanted to understand where the human limit ended, pushing that limit further every time. That is why his feats were not accidental flashes. They were the logical outcome of a man who refused to accept the boundaries imposed by nature and tradition. When he shattered a sandbag with a single kick, when he neutralized champions in seconds, when he mastered the nunchaku in 3 months better than others could in decades, he wasn't displaying strength. He was showing that the body could be tuned differently, that mind and muscle could work in a unity that seemed to violate the laws of physics. And all this happened not in a laboratory or on a movie set, but in ordinary gyms, in front of students, cameras, and witnesses who spent decades afterward trying to explain what they had seen. Bruce Lee wasn't just training. He was conducting an experiment on himself, and every record he set became proof that humans are capable of transcending what was previously thought possible. By the early 70s, it became clear. A confrontation with these impossible facts was inevitable. When one man repeatedly does what all calculations say cannot be done, the entire world of martial arts and science is forced to reconsider its understanding of what the human body can achieve. Bruce Lee never put on a show for the sake of showing off. He simply trained as if every day were an attempt to rewrite the laws of human physiology. And the first to experience this in practice was an ordinary 45 kilograms training bag. This was no flimsy piece of equipment for beginners. The bag was stitched from dense fabric, stuffed with sand, and designed to withstand thousands of strikes from professional heavyweights. World-class boxers pounded on such bags for years, and they would only sway slightly. But one day in a small Los Angeles gym, Bruce walked up to it with his usual focus. He took his stance, took a short breath, and delivered his famous super sidekick. The strike was short, explosive, and almost imperceptible to the naked eye. A sound echoed like a shotgun blast. The bag didn't rip or split along the seam. It literally flew to pieces. Sand poured onto the floor in a heavy, golden stream, while what was left of the casing hung from the chain in pathetic rags. The people standing around froze. Someone dropped a towel. No one uttered a word. Physicists later shown the recordings, and debris threw up their hands. To shatter such a bag required force equal to the impact of a car moving at 50 kilometers per hour. A car has an engine. Bruce had only 59 kilograms of body weight and incredible concentration. This was no random fluke. It was just the beginning. Bruce didn't stop at one bag. He kept pushing boundaries further, and every new feat became even more inexplicable. Take, for instance, his sparring sessions with masters. One of the most striking occurred with Vic Moore, the U.S. karate champion. A man who had won dozens of tournaments throughout his career and could read an opponent's movements instinctively. They agreed to a simple drill. Bruce would strike, and Vic would try to block. On paper, it looked fair, but in reality, it lasted less than 10 seconds. Bruce delivered a series of straight punches with such speed that while Vic's hands were just beginning to move into a blocking position, Bruce's fists had already touched the target and returned to stance. A champion accustomed to the fastest fighters on the planet looked as if he were moving underwater. His body simply couldn't react in time. Later, Vic admitted, "I felt like he was operating at a completely different speed." This was spoken not by a novice, but by a man who had dedicated his entire life to speed and reaction time. Bruce didn't just win. He rendered the opponent's accumulated experience completely useless. Experience, training, reflexes. All of it ceased to work when you stood against a man whose nervous system transmitted commands to his muscles faster than an average athlete's brain could even register them. Then came the 135 kilograms, 300 pounds bag. This was beyond all limits. The bag was massive, as heavy as an adult man. Bruce kicked it once, and the bag flew vertically 5 meters up into the air, crashing into the ceiling with a roar. 5 meters is the height of a 2-story building. James Coburn, an actor who trained with Bruce, later recalled in an interview, "I saw it with my own eyes. The bag literally slammed into the ceiling. I couldn't believe it." The students in the gym confirmed the same thing. The strike was repeated over and over, and every time the result was identical. Physicists reworked their calculations dozens of times. The math insisted. A man weighing 59 kilograms is physically incapable of transferring that much energy. Yet Bruce did it day after day, as if the laws of conservation of momentum didn't apply to him. Tension mounted with every new fact. People who witnessed this began to whisper. Martial arts masters who were once skeptical of Bruce now traveled just to watch, and he kept going. Next came the nunchaku. Bruce genuinely hated the weapon, calling it a useless piece of wood and chain. His friend Dan Inosanto spent months convincing him before Bruce agreed to give it a chance. Just 3 months. It took an ordinary person years to master the nunchaku, but in 12 weeks, Bruce mastered it to the point where the speed and power of his movements became legendary. A single strike with the nunchaku was calculated to generate up to 725 kilograms, 1,600 pounds, of force, enough to crack a skull or break a bone. He transformed a weapon he once deemed useless into his signature trademark. Masters from Okinawa, who had trained from childhood for decades, watched the recordings and shook their heads. Such a thing was simply impossible. Every new accomplishment raised more questions. How could a man who weighed less than an average boxer generate power equal to a blow from Muhammad Ali? How could he do 200 push-ups on 2 fingers, a record no one has even come close to repeating? How could he deliver 6 perfect kicks per second, twice as fast as the world record? Every time someone tried to explain this away as pure technique or simple training, the facts stood in the way because no technique could bridge the mass gap or alter the laws of physics. It demanded a different biology, a different nervous system, a different level of control over one's own body. And as the feats mounted, it became increasingly clear. Bruce Lee wasn't just training better than others. He was operating on a fundamentally different level of the human machine. His body was tuned differently, his mind perceived movement differently. The further he went with his experiments, the closer came the moment when the entire world of martial arts and science would have to admit the obvious. What he did went beyond what was considered possible for a normal human being. And that moment approached with every new strike, every new record, every new demonstration that could not be dismissed as luck or clever camera editing. Bruce Lee stood in front of the heavy 135 kilograms bag, hanging motionless from a thick chain beneath the ceiling of the small Los Angeles gym. Complete silence fell over the room. Students and guests pressed against the walls, while James Coburn, who trained alongside him, stood closest, his eyes locked on Bruce. Nobody breathed. Everyone already knew what was about to happen, yet deep down, everyone hoped that this time the bag would stay put. Bruce took one calm step, placed his feet slightly wider than shoulder-width apart, relaxed his hips and shoulders, and delivered a short, almost imperceptible kick. The blow landed dead center on the bag and sounded as if someone had struck an iron barrel with a sledgehammer. A dull, heavy, deafening boom echoed through the gym. The bag didn't just swing or start swaying slowly like ordinary bags did after heavyweight strikes. It surged upward with such incredible force that the chain snapped taut like a guitar string, and 135 kilograms of dead weight shot vertically 5 meters into the air, crashing into the ceiling with a thud. The ceiling beams shook, dust rained down across the room, and for a fraction of a second, the bag remained pinned against the ceiling as if held there by an invisible hand. The gym froze in an absolute silence that felt even heavier than the quiet before the kick. Sand began to trickle from the burst seams, falling to the floor in heavy golden streams. James Coburn stood with his mouth agape. His hands trembled slightly, because although he had seen this before, his brain refused every single time to accept what was happening. The students who had just watched Bruce tear smaller bags apart with a single blow and neutralize champions in seconds now stared at the scene with a mix of shock and awe. No one said a word, no one moved. Everyone just stood and watched as the massive bag slowly, almost reluctantly, began to fall back down. When the bag crashed to the ground, making the chain clank again as sand poured out in a full stream, Bruce Lee was already back in his starting stance. His breathing remained steady, his face entirely calm. There was not a drop of sweat on his skin. He didn't make a single unnecessary movement, as if he had merely adjusted a picture frame on the wall, rather than sending a mass more than double his own weight flying into the air. At that moment in the gym, a profound realization unfolded that completely flipped the understanding of everything taking place. First came the simple acceptance of the fact that the bag had indeed flown up 5 meters. Then came the realization of scale. A 59 kilograms man had just transferred energy equivalent to a car crash at 50 kilometers per hour. And finally, the deepest realization of all. This was no fluke or trick, but the natural outcome of how his body functioned. The witnesses standing along the walls felt the atmosphere in the room shift. The silence following the strike became the very tool that rendered the moment truly deafening. It lasted long, thick and almost tangible, and within it, one could hear the collapse of the entire conventional picture of human potential. Everyone present that day understood they had just seen something far beyond an ordinary workout. It wasn't just skill, nor was it just power. It was proof that Bruce Lee's body was built differently, that his nervous system, muscle fibers, and ability to focus energy functioned at a level that contemporary science couldn't explain. The hierarchy of human capabilities shifted right there, in front of living witnesses, beneath the plain ceiling of an ordinary gym. Bruce stepped back as the bag swung on its chain once more and began a slow sway. Sand kept falling, coating the floor in a thin golden layer. The students and guests remained motionless, trying to process what they had witnessed. Every new strike Bruce delivered after that day only intensified the feeling of inevitability. The bag flew to the ceiling time and time again, confirming each time what could no longer be denied. The man standing before them wasn't just breaking records. He was breaking the very concept of where a human ends and the impossible begins. After that day, no one could look at martial arts or human potential the same way again. Bruce Lee lowered his leg after the final kick. Sand continued to trickle quietly from the torn bag, covering the gym floor in a thin golden layer, while the heavy chain swayed gently beneath the ceiling, as if struggling to believe what had just transpired. At that moment, the small training room fell into that profound silence that follows true astonishment. Witnesses who had just seen a 59 kilograms man send more than twice his own body weight flying through the air stood motionless, trying to grasp what they had witnessed. James Coburn, who was present for many such demonstrations, later admitted that every single time, he felt something inside him change forever. The students standing along the walls gradually realized that they had witnessed not just an impressive training session, but a true redefinition of human capabilities. After days like that, the world around Bruce Lee was never the same again. Martial arts masters who once viewed him with skepticism now came to learn from him. Exercise scientists spent years analyzing his footage, notes, and eyewitness accounts, attempting to find an explanation for what they saw. Chuck Norris, one of the greatest martial artists of his era, openly admitted that in a real fight against Bruce, he wouldn't stand a chance. Thousands of athletes and fighters worldwide began reevaluating their training, their ideas about the body's limits, and the true meaning of efficiency. Bruce didn't leave behind a traditional school in the classic sense, he left behind an idea. The idea that limits exist only until someone decides to overcome them. His body, which worked at its absolute peak for so long, ultimately could not endure the heavy price he was willing to pay for perfection. Yet even after his passing, his legacy lived on. Training logs, thousands of pages of notes, movies, and stories from his students spread across the globe, inspiring new generations to look within themselves for that same ability to go beyond the ordinary. Bruce Lee proved that a human being is capable of far more than what is written in physiology and biomechanics textbooks. That same 135 kilograms bag that once flew to the ceiling from a single kick has long since become a legend, and along with it, the entire life of a man who refused to believe in the word impossible. Every time someone in a gym delivers a strike that seems too powerful for their weight, too fast for their height, or too precise for their training, the exact same silence hangs in the air for a moment, a silence acknowledging that boundaries were crossed, and that Bruce Lee walked that path first. He didn't just break sandbags and records. He broke the very idea of where human limits end.